Conducting background checks on prospective employees is a critical part of the hiring process. It helps ensure a safe and productive work environment, as well as compliance with various laws and regulations. This process involves several key steps, starting with understanding the legal landscape. Compliance with all applicable laws and regulations is paramount. Different states and jurisdictions have different rules regarding the types of information you can access and how you can use it. In some locations, for example, driving records can be requested for all employees. There are various types of background checks that can be conducted. These include, firstly, criminal record checks, which can be done at the federal level through the Federal Bureau of Investigation, at the state or local level, or even at the county or city level. Secondly, credit checks. These typically require written authorization from the applicant and are used to evaluate their financial stability and responsibility. Thirdly, education and employment verification. This involves contacting schools and previous employers to verify degrees, job titles, and performance. Fourthly, reference checks. This includes calling or emailing former colleagues, supervisors, or personal references to gather feedback on the applicant's performance and character. The background check process itself involves several stages. Firstly, notification and consent. It's essential to inform applicants about the background checks that will be conducted and obtain their written consent. This explanation should include the purpose of the checks, the types of checks that will be performed, and the timing of the process. Secondly, screening. All background check results should be reviewed thoroughly. Any potential red flags or discrepancies should be identified. Thirdly, evaluation. Assess the relevance and severity of any criminal or other records. Consider the job position and responsibilities when making this assessment. It may be necessary to consult with a hiring manager and legal counsel. Fourthly, decision-making. Hiring decisions should be based on the entire evaluation process. Document the reasons for any adverse employment actions taken. There are additional considerations to keep in mind throughout the background check process. Firstly, Fair Credit Reporting Act or FCRA compliance. If conducting credit checks, adherence to the Fair Credit Reporting Act is crucial. This includes providing adverse action notices and allowing applicants to dispute the result. Secondly, privacy. The privacy of applicants must be protected by securing background check information and only sharing necessary details with authorized personnel. Thirdly, the use of social media. Proceed with caution when evaluating social media profiles. Information should only be used if it is relevant to the job and does not discriminate against the applicant. Fourthly, external vendors. Consider using background check vendors for accuracy and efficiency. Ensure that these vendors have a proven track record and comply with all legal requirements. Fifthly, ongoing monitoring. For sensitive positions, periodic background checks after employment might be considered. Monitor news sources or public records for potential issues. In Massachusetts, for example, employers are generally limited to obtaining driving records for most positions. However, for certain roles, such as those involving direct care of children or vulnerable adults, more extensive criminal background checks may be permissible. It's crucial to understand these limitations and ensure compliance with state law. When evaluating criminal records, it's essential to consider the nature of the offense, the time elapsed since the offense occurred, and the relevance of the offense to the job in question. A minor offense from many years ago may not be as relevant as a more recent and serious offense. Consult with legal counsel to ensure that you're making fair and legally compliant hiring decisions. When conducting credit checks, be aware that the Fair Credit Reporting Act imposes specific requirements on employers. You must obtain written consent from the applicant before conducting a credit check, and you must provide the applicant with a copy of the credit report and a summary of their rights under the Fair Credit Reporting Act. If you decide not to hire an applicant based on their credit report, you must provide them with an adverse action notice, which includes the name and contact information of the credit reporting agency that provided the report, a statement that the decision was based on the credit report, and a summary of the applicant's rights to dispute the accuracy of the report. Employment verification is another important part of the background check process. Contact previous employers to verify the applicant's job titles, dates of employment, and job performance. Ask about the applicant's strengths and weaknesses, their ability to work with others, and their reasons for leaving their previous job. Reference checks can provide valuable insights into the applicant's character and work ethic. Contact former colleagues, supervisors, or personal references to gather feedback on the applicant's performance and character. Ask about the applicant's communication skills, their ability to solve problems, and their overall suitability for the job. Social media can be a valuable source of information about potential employees, but it's important to use it cautiously. Be aware of the potential for bias and discrimination when evaluating social media profiles. Only use information that is relevant to the job and does not violate any laws or regulations. For example, avoid making assumptions about an applicant's race, religion, or sexual orientation based on their social media posts. Consider using a third-party background check vendor to conduct background checks on your behalf. These vendors have the expertise and resources to conduct thorough and accurate background checks, and they can help you comply with all applicable laws and regulations. When choosing a vendor, be sure to select one that has a proven track record and is accredited by a reputable organization. Ongoing monitoring can be a valuable way to identify potential problems after an employee has been hired. For example, you can monitor news sources and public records for information about arrests, convictions, or other legal issues. You can also conduct periodic background checks to ensure that employees continue to meet your standards. If you discover that an employee has a criminal record or other issue that could pose a risk to your organization, take appropriate action. This may include terminating the employee, reassigning them to a different position, or providing them with additional training or supervision. When making employment decisions based on background check results, it's important to consider the totality of the circumstances. Don't rely solely on a single piece of information, such as a criminal record. Instead, consider the nature of the offense, the time elapsed since the offense occurred, the relevance of the offense to the job in question, and the applicant's overall qualifications. Document your decision-making process carefully. This will help you demonstrate that you made a fair and legally compliant decision. Keep records of all background check results, as well as any other information that you considered when making your hiring decision. Store these records securely and protect the privacy of applicants. Regularly review your background check policies and procedures to ensure that they are up to date and compliant with all applicable laws and regulations. Consult with legal counsel to ensure that you're following best practices. By following these steps, you can create a comprehensive background check process that helps you make informed hiring decisions, protect your organization from risk, and comply with all applicable laws and regulations. When conducting background checks, it is important to adhere to the Fair Credit Reporting Act, or FCRA, which is a federal law that regulates the collection, use, and disclosure of consumer information, including credit reports. The Fair Credit Reporting Act applies to employers who use credit reports or other consumer reports to make employment decisions such as hiring, promotion, or termination. Under the Fair Credit Reporting Act, employers must obtain written consent from the applicant or employee before obtaining a consumer report. The employer must also provide the applicant or employee with a clear and conspicuous disclosure that a consumer report may be used for employment purposes. If an employer takes adverse action against an applicant or employee based on information in a consumer report, the employer must provide the applicant or employee with an adverse action notice. The adverse action notice must include the name, address, and phone number of the consumer reporting agency that provided the report. A statement that the adverse action was based in whole or in part on information in the consumer report. A disclosure of the applicant's or employee's right to obtain a free copy of the consumer report from the consumer reporting agency. A disclosure of the applicant's or employee's right to dispute the accuracy or completeness of the information in the consumer report. The Fair Credit Reporting Act also imposes restrictions on the type of information that can be included in a consumer report. For example, consumer reports cannot include information about bankruptcies that are more than 10 years old, or civil suits, civil judgments, and paid tax liens that are more than 7 years old. In addition to the Fair Credit Reporting Act, many states have their own laws regulating background checks. These state laws may impose additional restrictions on employees, such as requiring them to obtain a criminal background check only after a conditional offer of employment has been made, or prohibiting them from asking about certain types of criminal records, such as arrests that did not lead to a conviction. It is important for employers to be aware of both federal and state laws regulating background checks and to ensure that their background check policies and procedures comply with these laws. Consulting with legal counsel can help employers ensure that they are following best practices and avoiding potential legal liability. Note that criminal history laws vary by state. It is important to consult with legal counsel to determine the specific requirements applicable to your organization. In addition to consulting with legal counsel, employers may also want to consider using a background check vendor to conduct background checks on their behalf. Background check vendors can provide employers with access to a wide range of information, including criminal records, credit reports, employment history, and educational records. They can also help employers comply with the Fair Credit Reporting Act and other applicable laws. When choosing a background check vendor, it is important to select a vendor that is accredited by the Professional Background Screening Association, or PBSA. The PBSA accreditation signifies that the vendor has met certain standards for quality, accuracy, and compliance. Employers should also ask the vendor about its data security practices and ensure that it has adequate measures in place to protect the privacy of applicant and employee information. Background checks are an important part of the hiring process. By conducting thorough and compliant background checks, employers can reduce their risk of hiring employees who may pose a threat to their organizations or their customers.